I know how it sounds. I wouldn't believe me either if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. But every time I close them now, I still see him, standing there, in the corner of the frame, smiling like he's been waiting for me to notice. It started when I was scrolling through the photos from my cousin Emma's wedding. You know the kind. Everyone pretending to be happier than they really are, the polished smiles, the champagne glow. For a moment, I actually felt something close to peace looking through them. Then I saw him in the far back of one of the group shots, where the trees blur into darkness. There was a man, pale, motionless, dressed like someone from another time. He wasn't posing, just staring directly at the camera. At me. I remember whispering, "Who the hell is that?" and zooming in until the pixels broke apart. The more I zoomed, the worse it looked. His face wasn't clear, not exactly. It was like my eyes couldn't settle on it. Every time I tried to focus, the shadows rearranged themselves, reshaping his mouth into a grin that hadn't been there a second ago. I swear he wasn't there that day. I remember every guest. I even helped Emma finalize the seating chart. No one by that name. No one with that face. But when I asked her, she frowned and said, "What man?" That's when I realized she couldn't see him. I laughed it off, told myself it was some weird artifact of the lens, a glitch. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I pulled out an old album, my parents' wedding, my grandparents too. You know, the old Thornfield family tradition, black and white portraits, big smiles, those massive velvet photo books that smell like dust and forgotten promises. And there he was. In every single one, sometimes near the edge of the frame, sometimes clearer than anyone else. The same sharp suit, same posture, same expression. Decades apart. A face that never aged, never changed. I told myself I was imagining it, that my brain was just finding patterns. But the human mind doesn't invent details this precise. The tilt of his head, the strange stiffness in his fingers, the way his shadow fell slightly against the light. And if you think it's Photoshop, I thought so too. Until I saw the originals. My grandmother's album was older than most of the cameras we use today. And that face was pressed right into the film, etched into the grain like it belonged there. I can't explain why. But the more I looked, the more real he felt. I began to notice other things, small at first. A reflection in the window that didn't match. The faint smell of old chemicals whenever I turned a page. I told myself to stop, to burn the photos, to delete the files, to forget I'd ever noticed him. But it's too late for that, because now, when I take pictures, I see him there too. It started with one photograph. But it didn't end there. The Thornfields have always treated weddings like coronations. I used to think that was normal. The sprawling estates, the imported flowers, the champagne fountains taller than most of the guests. My grandmother called it heritage. My father called it our duty. I just called it exhausting. But even I couldn't deny the beauty of it all. Every generation married with the same ceremony, in the same church on the hill, under the same oil-painted portraits of ancestors whose names no one remembered, but whose eyes followed you down the aisle. The Thornfields believed love was temporary, but photographs were forever. Each wedding came with its own album, heavy leather covers, gilded edges, pages so thick they creaked when you turned them. The albums weren't just keepsakes, they were relics. We didn't hang family portraits on the walls. We archived them, preserved them like museum exhibits. So, when my Aunt Margaret announced the plan to digitize the entire Thornfield collection for the family's bicentennial, I volunteered without hesitation. It sounded like the easiest task in the world. Scan, rename, organize, upload. The kind of quiet project you do with a cup of tea and a playlist of old songs. First, it was comforting. Each photograph was a window into a moment I'd never lived. Men in stiff tuxedos, women in lace gowns, awkward smiles frozen mid-laughter. I started to notice the similarities. The way the Thornfield men all tilted their heads the same way. The same pale gray eyes that never quite reflected light. It was eerie, but in a comforting, genetic kind of way. Until I reached 1963, that was when I should have stopped. The photo was from my great-uncle's wedding. One of those sepia-tone shots where everyone looks slightly ghostly from the exposure. I was adjusting the scanner settings when I noticed a blur near the back of the frame. Not the kind you get from motion, but something else. A presence that refused to stay still even in stillness. I leaned in closer. There he was, the same pale man from Emma's wedding photo, standing at the edge of the crowd. not quite touching anyone, but somehow more in focus than the bride herself. The details were clearer this time. Dark suit, narrow tie, slicked back hair that looked almost wet. And that smile, faint, polite, almost proud. Like he belonged there. I stared at that image for hours, comparing it to the modern ones. Same face, same angle, same eyes. It didn't make sense. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence. Maybe an uncle with strong genetics or a trick of light. But then I scanned the next album. 1948, same man. 1927, still there. 1903, the first Thornfield wedding ever recorded. And there he was again, standing in the background like time didn't apply to him. I don't know how long I sat there flipping through albums. The scanner light flashing over and over, the hum of the machine blending with my heartbeat. I started whispering to myself just to fill the silence. I should have stopped scanning when I reached 1963, I muttered. But curiosity is a disease in my family. The more I looked, the more the photos seemed to shift. I'd scan one, look away, and when I looked back, his position was slightly different, closer to the camera, clearer, sharper. It was impossible, yet there it was. That night, I dreamed of weddings I'd never attended. I saw faces I didn't know, standing in rooms that felt familiar. In every one of them, the same figure waited by the door, smiling as if posing for a photo only he knew was being taken. When I told Aunt Margaret the next morning, she didn't laugh. She didn't even look surprised. She was standing by the window, sunlight catching the dust in the air, when she said quietly, "You shouldn't be looking at those for too long. The more attention you give him, the clearer he gets." I froze. "You mean you've seen him too?" She hesitated, then turned toward me. Her eyes were tired, older than I remembered. "Everyone in this family has. We just pretend we haven't." Before I could ask more, she walked away, muttering something about tea. But I didn't move. I couldn't, because when I turned back to the scanner, the preview screen showed a new image. One I hadn't scanned yet. Was the same wedding photo from 1963. The same smiling crowd. The same pale man in the background. Only now, his head was turned toward me, and he was smiling wider. That was when Aunt Margaret's voice echoed from the hallway, trembling but certain. "You've seen him too, haven't you?" Aunt Margaret lived in the oldest part of the Thornfield estate, the East Wing, the part that always smelled faintly of lavender and mildew. It was a place that felt outside of time, where clocks ticked a little slower and dust seemed to settle before your eyes. When I arrived, she already had tea waiting, the kind served in fragile porcelain cups with hairline cracks spidering down the sides. She didn't say hello. She just gestured for me to sit, her expression tight, like she'd been expecting this conversation for a long time. "You've seen him," she said before I could speak. Her voice was calm, but there was a tremor beneath it, like a string pulled too tight. I wanted to lie, to play dumb, but I couldn't force the words out. Instead, I nodded. "The man in the photos," I said quietly. "Who is he?" Margaret sighed, stirring her tea though she hadn't added anything to it. "We call him the guest." The name felt wrong. Too ordinary, too polite for something that made my stomach twist. "He's been in every wedding photo since the first Thornfield ceremony," she continued. "Always in the background, never aging, never smiling too much, never doing anything that would draw attention. He's just there." I leaned forward. "You mean he's been there for more than 100 years? "More," she whispered. "The first time he appeared was in 1903 at Elias and Constance Thornfield's wedding. No one knew who he was then either. Some said he was one of Elias's photography assistants. Others said he wasn't there at all." I frowned, and no one questioned it. "Oh, they questioned it," she said, eyes distant. "But only once. Because every bride who ever saw him, really saw him, met a tragic end not long after. Car crashes, fevers. One drowned in her own bathtub, always before their first anniversary." A cold heaviness settled in my chest. "You think he causes it?" She gave me a look I couldn't read. "I think he witnesses it. Or maybe he collects it." I stared into my tea, watching the faint ripples tremble across the surface. "Why would he appear in the photos then?" Margaret smiled, a sad, brittle expression. "Maybe that's his way of remembering them." For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint ticking of the grandfather clock. Dust motes drifted lazily through the light, like fragments of time. Then she rose and crossed the room to a tall cabinet. Its glass doors were fogged with age, and I could just make out rows of thick, leather-bound albums inside. She opened it carefully, as if afraid to disturb whatever slept within. "These," she said, "are the Thornfield archives. Every wedding, every portrait, every celebration. But there's one album you mustn't look at." Her hand hovered over a particular volume bound in faded green leather. The year 1921. I swallowed. "Why not? It's not meant to be seen by the living," she said. Her tone was so steady that I almost laughed. Except she wasn't joking, of course. That made me want to see it even more. Curiosity, after all, is a disease in my family. When she finally showed me the 1921 album, I understood why she'd kept it hidden. The photographs inside were wrong. Not damaged, not fake, just wrong. The lighting didn't make sense. Shadows stretched in directions they shouldn't. The guests' faces looked slightly blurred, like they'd been caught mid-breath, and in the center of every frame, there he was. The guest thought he wasn't in the background anymore. He was standing close enough to touch the bride's veil. His hand hovered inches from her face, his eyes fixed on her with something that might have been affection or hunger. Margaret's voice broke the silence. "She died 3 days later," she said. "Fell from the balcony during their honeymoon. Her husband claimed she'd been pulled. No one believed him." I couldn't stop staring. The more I looked, the more his gaze seemed to shift, aligning not with the bride, but with me. His eyes weren't looking at the bride, I whispered. They were looking at me. Margaret snapped the album shut so fast that dust puffed into the air. "That's enough," she said sharply. "He notices when you notice him." I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but something in her expression silenced me. It wasn't fear, it was resignation. She returned the album to the cabinet, locked it, and handed me the key. "If you're smart, you'll throw this away," she said. "Forget what you saw. Forget him." I nodded, but my hands were already trembling with the weight of what I wanted to do next, because I knew I wouldn't forget. That night, when she went to bed, I stayed behind under the pretense of cleaning up. The cabinet stood in the corner like a sleeping animal, the key still warm in my pocket. My pulse drummed in my ears as I unlocked it and slid the 1921 album free. The leather was soft and cracked beneath my fingers, and the faint scent of old chemicals filled the air, developer fluid. Or something older. I tucked the photo between the pages of my notebook, careful not to crease it. I told myself I needed proof, something tangible to study, something real. But as I stepped outside into the cool night air, the house seemed to exhale behind me. A low groan echoing through the walls that I should have listened to her, that I should have never taken that photo home, that I told myself I was just going to study it, digitize it, enhance it, analyze it, like a scientist, not a paranoid relative clutching at family ghosts. That was how I justified taking the photo home. I set up my desk that night with surgical precision. Gloves on, low light, scanner dusted clean. The 1921 photograph sat in the middle of my workspace like something sacred. Even under the yellow glow of my lamp, it felt alive. I powered on the scanner. The motor whined softly, the light bar sliding beneath the glass in a slow, deliberate crawl. I held my breath as the image appeared on my monitor. First faint, then clearer, then impossibly sharp. The man's face emerged like something being remembered by the machine. Old-fashioned suit, narrow tie, hair slicked down in neat waves. The faintest trace of a smile curved his lips, but it wasn't warm. It looked rehearsed, the kind of expression you put on when someone tells you to act human. What froze me, though, were the eyes. They were too focused, too knowing. Every pixel that defined them seemed to sharpen beyond the rest of the image, as if the camera had only ever cared about him. I zoomed in, adjusting contrast, exposure, everything. The more I enhanced, the more I saw what shouldn't be there. His shadow didn't align with the light source. His pupils caught no reflection. And behind him, where the ballroom's mirrored wall should have shown the crowd, there was nothing. Just empty glass, no reflection. No trace. I rubbed my temples, telling myself I was overtired, that this was a trick of old emulsion, a degradation artifact. But deep down, I already knew. The Thornfields had spent a century documenting something that refused to be captured. I moved to the next step, comparison. I scanned another photo from a different decade, aligning them side by side. The posture was identical. Not just similar, identical. The same tilt of the head, the same spacing between buttons, even the same dust scratch on his lapel. As if the image itself had been copied across generations. I should have stopped then. But curiosity is a disease in my family that I started scanning every wedding photo I could find. 1903, 1948, 1963. The hum of the scanner filled the room, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Each image came alive in digital clarity, and each one contained him. Only something strange began happening the longer I worked. The light in the room flickered. Just once at first, a blink, like the power hiccuped. Then again, longer this time, plunging me into momentary darkness before buzzing back to life. The monitor glitched too, faint horizontal lines, static that crawled across the image whenever his face appeared. My headphones hissed with low feedback even though no audio was playing. Still, I kept scanning. It wasn't until I reached the 1963 photo again that everything went wrong. The image rendered on the screen. The static deepened, forming patterns, streaks that almost resembled fingerprints pressed against the digital glass. I leaned closer, squinting, trying to make sense of it. That's when I heard it. A whisper, right behind me. Smile. I froze. The word was so soft it could have been my own imagination, a hiss of air conditioning or the creak of the house. But then I heard it again, clearer, closer, in a tone that almost sounded amused. Smile. My hand trembled on the mouse. I turned slowly, expecting emptiness. And yes, the room was empty, except for the faint smell of chemicals, sharp and metallic like old photo developer. When I looked back at the screen, my stomach dropped. The man's face was closer now, not the zoom. The photo itself had changed. He'd shifted forward in the frame, shoulders squared, eyes locked straight into the camera. And behind him, faintly visible, were outlines, transparent silhouettes of faces I recognized. My family, cousins, aunts, people who hadn't even been born in 1921. Every photo I scanned that night changed. I deleted the files in a panic, but the folder kept restoring itself, reappearing on the desktop seconds later. I yanked the USB drive out and tossed it across the desk. The lights flickered again, this time staying off for a full 3 seconds. In that brief darkness, I swear I saw a movement in the monitor's reflection, a hand resting lightly on my shoulder. When the light returned, I forced myself to check the physical photo again. The original, the paper version. My heart was hammering as I lifted it to the lamp. There it was, the ballroom, the crowd, the smiling couple. And in the background, the guest, hand poised on the bride's shoulder. But when I tilted the photo just slightly, catching the reflection of the lamp on the glossy surface, I saw the impossible. His hand wasn't on her shoulder anymore. It was on mine. I dropped it. The picture fluttered to the floor face down, like it was trying to hide. I wanted to burn it, to erase every copy, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at the scanner's faint glow. Something shifted on the monitor again, the desktop background flickering for a heartbeat to show another image. My own reflection, seated exactly where I was, with him standing behind me. My throat went dry. He wasn't in just the Thornfield weddings anymore. I whispered. He was in mine. I shut the computer off, pulled the plug, and still, for a split second, the screen stayed on, just long enough for me to see his expression change. The faint, polite smile turned into a full grin. And that's when the photos started updating themselves. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his grin burned into the back of my eyelids. That polite, practiced smile widening until it no longer looked human. By morning, my rational mind had kicked back in. Ghosts weren't real. There had to be an explanation, a shared visual flaw, a retouched photo, maybe even a family prank gone too far. The Thornfields love tradition. Maybe this was just another inside joke passed down through the years that I told myself I was going to prove it. So I started digging. The Thornfield archives were stored in the town's historical society. Thick, dust-coated ledgers, brittle albums, and crumbling news clippings. It smelled like mildew and dead flowers. The kind of place where memories went to rot. The curator, Mrs. Pennington, was kind enough to let me look through the early records. "You Thornfields love your weddings," she chuckled as she handed me a stack of old local newspapers. "Seems like your family practically built this town." That was true. The Thornfields had always been prominent. Real estate, shipping, politics. And every few decades, a new wedding to cement their legacy. But as I flipped through the yellowed pages, one headline stopped me cold. "Photographer crushed in stage collapse during Thornfield wedding." August 17th, 1903. The accompanying photo, black and white, grainy, showed a twisted wooden platform, shattered under the weight of some ornate set piece. And just barely visible in the corner, a fallen camera, its bellows cracked open like a ruptured lung. The article named the victim, Elias Thornfield. I frowned. That wasn't right. Elias wasn't a branch of the family I recognized. The piece explained that he wasn't a guest. He'd been hired to photograph the wedding of Edmund and Lillian Thornfield, the founding couple of the estate. But after his death, rumors began spreading through the staff. Witnesses claimed they heard him say, moments before the accident, "I'll capture every Thornfield wedding, in life or death." A superstition, maybe, the kind of morbid story families tell to spice up their own mythology. But something about it gnawed at me. I dug deeper, cross-referencing every Thornfield wedding since then. Every decade, and in every single one, the same name appeared, not always as photographer, but as assistant, witness, or anonymous guest. Sometimes E. Thornfield, other times E.T. or Elias T. He never disappeared, and neither did his image. When I returned home that evening, the air inside my apartment felt heavier. The light seemed dimmer, shadows thicker. I brushed it off. Fatigue, probably. I'd spend hours in a dusty archive that I opened my laptop to organize notes, and froze. There was a new email waiting in my inbox. No subject line. The sender read, elias.thornfield@photomail.co.uk to AT. First I laughed. It had to be some cousin messing with me, right? But then I opened it. There was only one attachment. A photograph. It was a picture of my office, my desk, my chair, the faint glow of my monitor, all captured from a slightly elevated angle, like someone had been standing just behind me when it was taken. And in the reflection of the monitor screen, barely visible but undeniably there, was him. That faint, too sharp smile. I deleted the email immediately. But before I could even close the window, another message appeared. Same address, same format, another image attached. This one stopped my breath entirely. It was me, asleep. My head tilted on the pillow, mouth slightly open. The lamp on the bedside table casting just enough light to see the outline of my body under the sheets. And at the edge of the frame, a shadow, human-shaped. Watching. My skin prickled with ice. I didn't take that photo. I didn't even own a camera capable of that angle. And I sure as hell hadn't uploaded anything to the cloud. I checked every device in the house. Webcam covered. Phone off. Nothing made sense. By the time the third email arrived, I was shaking. This one contained no photo, just text. "You're doing good work. Keep scanning." I slammed the laptop shut. My pulse was pounding so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the darkened screen, waiting for it to flicker back to life like it had before, but it didn't. Instead, my phone buzzed. A notification. Another email, same sender. Another attachment. I didn't want to open it, but I did. Of course I did. This one was dated 3 days in the future. The timestamp read, October 16th, 2025, 5:42 p.m. It showed me standing in front of a white altar, surrounded by family and guests. Everyone smiling. And behind us, faint, blurred, but there, him, Elias. The background wasn't my apartment. It was the Thornfield estate, the ballroom. And judging by the decor, it was the setting for an upcoming wedding. My cousin Claire's wedding. My stomach turned. I hadn't told anyone I was going. I hadn't even RSVP'd yet. How did he know? The rational part of me wanted to dismiss it all as elaborate digital trickery, a hacked email, a deep fake, a cruel joke. But deep inside, I knew the truth no explanation could smother. Elias hadn't stopped photographing Thornfields. He'd found a new subject. Me. That night, I tore through every family record again, desperate to find some pattern, some way out. In a worn leather diary belonging to Lillian Thornfield, the bride from 1903, I found a final clue. Her handwriting trembled across the page. The man behind the camera is not dead. His eyes are the lens. His soul, the film. Every Thornfield bride he captures, he keeps. The ink bled near the end, as if the page had gotten wet, or as if she'd been pulled away mid-sentence. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. If Elias Thornfield wanted another photo, he'd have to take it himself, and the next Thornfield wedding would give him that chance. I didn't sleep the night before the wedding. Not that it mattered. I doubt anyone in the Thornfield line ever truly rests before these things. My hands shook as I knotted my tie, eyes darting to every reflective surface in my hotel room, half expecting to see a face that wasn't mine. The morning light was thin and colorless, the kind of pale brightness that makes everything look already overexposed. The estate looked beautiful, though. The gardeners had trimmed every hedge, every rosebush symmetrical and obedient. A white canopy stretched across the lawn like a shroud, and the air smelled of champagne, perfume, and the faint metallic tang of anxiety. It was supposed to be a happy day, my cousin Claire's wedding, the newest Thornfield celebration. But even the laughter felt rehearsed, like everyone was performing normalcy just well enough to fool themselves. Inside, the ballroom glowed with gold light. The chandeliers cast soft, liquid halos across marble floors, and everywhere I turned there were cameras, DSLRs, phones, drones hovering discreetly near the ceiling. The Thornfields never left a moment undocumented. Every smile was an artifact, every kiss, an heirloom. I told myself I came to confront Elias, that I wasn't afraid. But when I stepped into that room and felt all those lenses pointed my way, I realized the truth. I was walking willingly into his domain. The ceremony began smoothly enough. Claire looked radiant, her dress a cascade of white silk, her groom stiff with pride. The string quartet played some classical piece I couldn't name. For a while, it felt normal, safe, even. Then the glitches started. The main photographer, a tall man with expensive gear, frowned at his camera. The shutter jammed. His flash misfired. One by one, guests' phones froze, screens flickering with static for a second too long. Someone laughed it off, blaming the Wi-Fi. But I noticed something else. The mirrors in the ballroom had begun to ripple, just slightly, like the air above a flame. And when I blinked, I could have sworn the shadows along the floor were stretching toward the altar. I tried to keep calm. I tried to look normal. But when the vows began, I caught sight of movement behind the priest. There, standing in the corner, where no one else seemed to notice, was a man in an outdated black suit. Pale, clean-shaven, his tie slightly crooked. His eyes locked on me. Elias. I froze, breath shallow. For a moment, I thought maybe it was just another guest, someone I hadn't recognized. But then he smiled, that same wrong smile that never reached his eyes, and I knew. The photographer groaned, clutching his chest. His camera slipped from his hands and hit the floor, lens cracking like bone. Guests gasped, rushing to his side. But I couldn't move. My focus stayed on the figure behind the altar, who now stood perfectly still amid the chaos, calm as if posing for a portrait. And then I heard it, the faint click of a shutter. Even though no one was holding a working camera, I spun around. Every phone in the room flashed at once. Not together, not in sync, a stuttering sequence of white bursts, like lightning trapped inside the ballroom. Every flash made him sharper. Elias stepped closer with each blink of light, the static of overlapping photos bleeding into my vision. His suit darkened, edges distorting, his face phasing in and out of focus. And all the while, the chorus of camera clicks echoed in perfect rhythm with my heartbeat. I snapped. I lunged for the fallen photographer's camera, grabbed it, and smashed it against the marble floor. The impact echoed like thunder. The lens shattered, the casing splintered, and for a heartbeat, the lights in the ballroom flickered out completely. When they came back on, Elias was gone. But before I could breathe, someone near the aisle gasped. A young woman was pointing at her phone. Her voice trembled. It moved. Dozens of guests lifted their phones, murmuring. Their screens glowed with the same image, a live photo of the ceremony. But the frames were shifting. The people inside the photos were moving slightly, turning toward the camera, their eyes unfocused. And in each image, behind them, Elias was there, clear now, perfectly lit, as if he'd posed for every single shot. The air grew electric. A low hum filled the room, like static crawling under the skin. Someone screamed, and I turned just in time to see a burst of white light explode from another guest's phone. When my vision cleared, Elias stood barely an arm's length away. His presence was suffocating, the faint scent of developer chemicals and something sweet, like decay masked with cologne, that he didn't speak. He didn't need to die. He lifted his hand slowly, deliberately, and rested it on my shoulder. Cold, heavy, and then he smiled for the camera. Flash. Everything went white. the noise, the panic, the gasps, all swallowed by that one blinding instant. My body felt weightless, like I'd been pulled backward through glass. The last thing I remember was his whisper, too close to my ear to be real. "You're part of the picture now." Then, nothing. When I woke, the world had moved on. It was 3 days later. I was in a guest room at the Thornfield estate, lying on crisp sheets that smelled faintly of lilies and dust. My head throbbed, my throat dry. No one would meet my eyes. Claire's wedding had been postponed, they said. Technical issues, family emergency. No one mentioned Elias. No one mentioned the collapse of every digital file, the fried memory cards, the phones that wouldn't turn on again. But later that night, when I checked my email, I saw a new message waiting. No subject. No text. Just one attachment. A single photo. The Thornfield family, standing in front of the altar. All smiling. All perfect. And right there in the center, me. Elias's hand resting proudly on my shoulder. His eyes, sharp and alive. Mine, glassy and still. I thought it was over. I told myself what happened at the wedding was just collective hysteria, a trick of the lights, mass panic, something my mind twisted into nightmare. But denial is just a slower kind of death, isn't it? It started again a week later. A small, unmarked envelope appeared on my doorstep. No return address, no postage, just my name, written in shaky cursive that looked almost developed, like it had bled out of the paper instead of being written on it. Inside was a single USB drive. Black, unremarkable. I stared at it for hours before I plugged it in. Maybe I already knew what I'd find. The drive contained one folder, Thornfield_archive. Inside that, dozens of subfolders, each labeled by year. Some went as far back as 1903. Others were disturbingly current. Every image was perfect, the kind of clarity no camera from those early decades could have achieved. I recognized faces from my childhood, weddings I'd attended, people who'd died long before I was born. All smiling, all preserved, and in every photo, somewhere in the frame, Elias. Sometimes he was obvious, standing tall among the guests. Other times he hid in reflections, window glass, the gleam of a champagne bottle. But he was always there, watching, cataloging. I almost stopped when I reached the folder labeled 2025. The last photo showed the Thornfield estate, the same ballroom, same altar. I was in the center, frozen mid-blink, pale and stiff. Elias beside me, hand on my shoulder, just like the one I'd received in that email. But there was one more folder. 2026. My heart pounded. It shouldn't exist. No Thornfield wedding was scheduled for next year. I hesitated for a long time, hand trembling over the trackpad. Then I opened it, just one image. A church, dimly lit, rows of black suits and veiled faces. A casket at the front. The angle was perfect, a photographer's vantage point, just before a eulogy begins. The name carved into the plaque on the coffin read, my name, that I don't remember breathing. I don't even remember screaming. I just remember falling out of my chair and crawling backward until I hit the wall. The air felt wrong, heavy, damp, like the room itself had filled with developer fluid. I yanked the USB from the computer and hurled it across the room. Then I smashed the laptop, the monitor, the external drives. I burned the photos I'd printed, tore every frame off my walls, shredded anything with an image. But when I turned on my phone to call someone, anyone, the lock screen lit up with a photo I'd never taken. Me, sitting right there, surrounded by torn photographs. Elias behind me, blurred but smiling. I threw the phone into the sink and ran the water. But as it sank, the screen stayed lit, the image slowly distorting, his face elongating, eyes sharpening until they stared through the glass. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark, every creak of the house a camera shutter, every reflection an accusation. By morning, new images had appeared in my email drafts. Unsent, but there. Each one a photo of me, taken from impossible angles. Walking down the hall, standing by the window, asleep. And then I noticed something worse. On social media, random accounts started tagging me in old family photos. Ones I'd never uploaded. Ones from the Thornfield albums. But every tag carried the same suggestion in its metadata. Person may be Elias Thornfield. Even the AI photo tools recognized him now, as if the world itself had learned his name. That's when I realized the curse had changed. It wasn't trapped in film anymore. Elias had evolved. He'd become digital, omnipresent. Destroying photos didn't matter. The internet was his darkroom now. Every upload, every face recognition scan, every algorithmic tag was another exposure. And somewhere in that endless cloud of data, he was developing us all. I tried reaching out to family. No one answered. Their accounts went dark one by one. The Thornfield website disappeared. Even the historical records at the local library wiped clean, like someone had gone through and deleted our entire lineage. But I know better. You can't delete what's already been printed into the negatives of reality. And if you're listening to this, if you're reading these words, check your photos. Right now, look at the backgrounds, the reflections, the crowd shots you never really studied. See if there's someone there you don't recognize. Tall, pale, eyes too sharp for the lighting. That's him. And once you see him, he sees you too. I think that's how it spreads. Not through blood, but through recognition. Every time someone looks at his face, the shutter opens a little wider. They say every family has a curse. But I think every family has a Thornfield somewhere. A ghost framed between pixels, smiling for eternity that I've stopped running. There's no point. Instead, I've decided to record this final message. If someone finds this video someday, if it's ever uploaded, maybe you'll understand why you should have looked away. Because the moment you press play, the exposure begins again. And he'll be there, right behind you. If you're watching this, I'm sorry that I didn't want to record another message. I swore I was done. I destroyed everything, smashed every camera, wiped every drive. But somehow, this one keeps coming back. Every time I delete it, I wake up and it's there again, waiting on my desktop, perfectly edited, perfectly framed, like someone else is doing the work for me. You can probably hear it in my voice. I haven't slept in days, maybe weeks. It's hard to tell anymore when all the clocks in my house have stopped at the same time, 3:17 a.m. The hour the flash went off. The hour he stepped into focus. I keep thinking about that moment. The white light, the weight of his hand, the sound of my heartbeat syncing with the shutter. It doesn't fade, no matter how long I stare at the dark. You want to know the truth? I think he's still taking pictures, not just of me, of everyone. Every time someone posts a wedding photo online, I see him. Sometimes it takes a few hours, sometimes a few days, but he's always there, in the background, watching. And the scary part? No one else seems to notice that I tried warning people, commenting under random posts. Look behind you, I wrote. There's someone in the background. But the replies stopped coming. The posts disappeared. The accounts vanished. It's like the internet itself is censoring him or protecting him. I don't even use a webcam anymore. I've covered every mirror, every reflective surface, but still, I catch glimpses. Tiny flashes in the corner of my eye. The glint of a lens where there shouldn't be one. Last night, I thought I saw him standing in the window. I ran outside, but when I got there, the street was empty. Then I went back inside, checked the reflection again, and realized the figure in the glass wasn't in the room behind me. It was standing beside me. That's when I started seeing him in my own reflection, not just over my shoulder, inside it. The contours of my face subtly shifting, the eyes just slightly off. I smiled once, testing myself, and for a fraction of a second, my reflection didn't smile back. I think he's learning me, mimicking me, maybe replacing me. Please, if you're watching this, don't look at your old photos. Don't dig through your albums. Don't scan your family archives, especially if your surname is Thornfield. And if you've ever been tagged in a photo you don't remember taking, don't open it. I know curiosity feels harmless. It starts with just one click, one zoom, one face you can't explain. That's how it started for me too. I thought I was exposing a mystery, but all I did was invite him in. He doesn't need a camera anymore. He just needs eyes. Every time someone looks, he's there. Every screen, every pixel, every reflection, 1,000 little lenses capturing you. He's in your phone, your doorbell cam, your social feeds. He's everywhere. You can check your wedding photos if you want. Go ahead, scroll back through them. Look closely at the corners, the blurred guests, the faint shapes behind the crowd. If you see a man in an old-fashioned black suit, eyes too clear for the lighting, that's him. That's Elias Thornfield, and once you see him, he sees you. I keep thinking maybe this video is the end. Maybe if I tell the story, if I pass it on, it'll stop with me. But that's the trick, isn't it? Stories don't end. They reproduce. They multiply. Elias was a photographer, but maybe he wasn't just obsessed with weddings. Maybe he was obsessed with permanence. The idea that a picture could outlive the people in it. And now he's found a way to make us his negatives. I can feel him developing me, bit by bit. Every time the light flickers, my skin feels thinner, translucent, like I'm being printed onto something I can't see. You know what the worst part is? I can't even tell where I end and he begins anymore. When I talk, sometimes the playback sounds different, lower, calmer, not quite my voice. And sometimes, when I smile, it feels rehearsed. Beat, you're still here, aren't you? Watching, listening. I told you not to, but it's okay. Curiosity is a disease in my family. Maybe it's contagious. Do me one favor. After this video ends, go to your camera roll. Open your oldest picture, then your newest. Compare them. See if the background has changed. See if there's someone there who wasn't before. And if you find him, if he's standing there, smiling behind you, don't panic. Don't look away, because the moment you do, he moves. I think that's how he gets through. When the lens breaks, when your eyes close, when you blinked, that's when he steps out. So smile for the camera. Keep still. Don't blink. You'll feel his hand soon. Cold, steady. He always poses the same way. And when you feel that touch, when the flash burns through your vision and everything turns white, remember what I said, that if he's in your photos, it's already too late. Static. The image stutters, freezes. The frame lingers on my face. The corners of my mouth curling too far upward. The eyes too wide, too bright. And just before the feed cuts to black, you can see him standing behind me. Elias Thornfield, smiling for the camera.